7 surprising animals I met in Malawi's hidden safari. Forget what you think you know about an African safari. Seriously. Throw out those postcard images of endless savannas and the hunt for the big 5. That story has been told 1,000 times. When I came to Malawi, the warm heart of Africa, hearing whispers about its wildlife comeback, but I wasn't prepared for what I found. This wasn't about passively watching animals from a distance. It was like stepping into a secret world. It wasn't about ticking off a list. It was about up-close, personal encounters in a country that's rewriting its own story. Malawi's hidden parks delivered one surprise after another. These 7 encounters, from the totally bizarre to the breathtakingly beautiful, completely flipped my understanding of the African bush. And trust me, this first one is a real heavy hitter, pun intended. The river tyrant, hippopotamus. Our journey starts in Liwonde National Park, a park defined not by grasslands, but by the mighty Shire River. And if the Shire is the park's lifeblood, its pulse is the sound of the hippo. Now, I know what you're thinking. A hippo? Surprising? I get it. They're a staple. But you haven't seen hippos until you've been on a tiny boat in Liwonde, navigating what feels like a kingdom of them. Our guide claimed this is one of the densest concentrations of hippos in all of Africa. And honestly, I believe him. You don't just see them. You weave your boat through them. Our guide, David, cut the engine. The silence was instantly broken by a chorus of deep, rumbling chuckles that seemed to bubble up from the river itself. All around us, eyes, ears, and nostrils broke the surface like living periscopes, all pointed right at us. There were pods of 20, 30, even 40. The water was a mosaic of their massive gray backs. The surprise wasn't just seeing a hippo. It was the overwhelming, almost intimidating feeling of their complete and total control. We were guests, and they knew it. David pointed to a massive bull off our port side. Its head was the size of a boulder. It let out a yawn, and this was no sleepy gesture. It was a threat, a terrifying display of ivory tusks as long as my forearm. This comical-looking animal is responsible for more human deaths in Africa than any other large mammal. A fact you're constantly reminded of on their home turf. We drifted past a sandbank where a few were sunbathing, their huge bodies glistening. They look so lazy, but David told us that at night, these guys venture miles inland to graze, packing away 80 pounds of grass in an evening. They're masters of both land and water. The real tension comes from what you can't see. You only ever see the top 10% of a hippo. The other 90%, all that power and bulk, is lurking right under the surface. They can hold their breath for 5 minutes, vanishing and then popping up somewhere completely new, sometimes uncomfortably close. It keeps you on a constant low-grade adrenaline buzz. This wasn't just a sighting, it was an immersion. On the Shire River, the lion isn't king. Here, life revolves around the whims and sheer mass of the hippo. It was a total recalibration of the safari hierarchy and the perfect humbling start to my Malawian education. The gray ghost, elephant from Liwonde's River Kingdom, we headed to the dense woodlands of Majestic Wildlife Reserve. If Liwonde is defined by water, Mahete feels like a fortress of wilderness with a miracle of a backstory. By the late 90s, poaching had turned Mahete into an empty park. Elephants, rhinos, lions, all gone. Then, in 2003, the conservation group African Park stepped in. What they pulled off is one of the most successful rewilding projects on the continent. They reintroduced species after species, literally bringing the park back from the dead. Elephants were among the first to return in 2006, and today the population is so healthy that Mahete sends its elephants to repopulate other parks. Talk about a comeback. Knowing this made the search feel so much more meaningful. We were looking for the descendants of ghosts. But for 2 days, all we saw were clues. Giant footprints in the mud, snapped branches, and enormous piles of dung. Our guide, Benson, just smiled. They are here, he'd say. They are just shy. Shy wasn't a word I associated with a 6-ton animal, but I was about to learn my second surprising lesson. An elephant can be a ninja, a giant gray ninja. On the third morning, we were parked in a grove of trees when Benson froze, listening. I heard nothing. Then, a branch cracked. Not far away, it was right there. I whipped my head around and my heart slammed into my ribs. Not 20 feet away, in a thicket I would have sworn was empty seconds before, stood a massive bull elephant. He didn't charge or trumpet. He just appeared, utterly silent. A mountain of gray that had slipped through the dense bush without making a sound. His skin was a roadmap of wrinkles, caked in red dust. He just watched us with an ancient, intelligent gaze, raised his trunk to get our scent, and gently fanned his ears. The surprise was the stealth. An animal that big should shake the ground, but he moved like a phantom. We spent an hour with him as he stripped bark off a tree and casually kicked over another to get to the tasty leaves at the top. At one point, he got so close I could have reached out and touched his rough hide. There was no fear, just pure awe. This wasn't just any elephant. He was a living symbol of Malawi's resilience. He was proof that what was lost can be found again. As he finally ambled off, disappearing as silently as he arrived, I got it. The thrill here isn't just what you see, but the story behind it. This was a promise kept. The painted ghost, Nyala. After the raw power of the hippo and the silent might of the elephant, our next encounter felt like stumbling into a secret garden. It was an animal I'd barely even heard of, one that perfectly captures the subtle, low-key beauty of Malawi's bush, the Nyala. We were still in Mahete, but we'd moved to a riverine forest. The light here was magical, filtering through the canopy and dappled shafts. We left the vehicle and went on foot, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth. This wasn't the Africa of my daydreams. This was a place for secrets. Suddenly, our guide stopped and pointed into a tangle of vines. At first, I saw nothing but a mess of leaves and shadows. Nyala, he breathed. I squinted, and slowly, like a magic eye picture, an animal materialized. It was a female, and she was stunning. Smaller and more delicate than other antelope, her rich chestnut coat was marked with thin, vertical white stripes. Perfect camouflage. She moved with a liquid grace, her huge ears swiveling to catch every sound. She was the spirit of the forest brought to life. But the real shock came a moment later when a male followed her into a small clearing. It was like seeing a completely different species. He was almost twice her size, with a dark slate-gray shaggy coat, a crest of white-tipped hair down his back, and bright yellow-orange legs, and the horns. A magnificent, spiraling, lyre-shaped set. The difference between them is so extreme that early explorers classified them as two separate species, and you can see why. He was a dark king, and she was a forest princess. Nyala are notoriously shy, preferring dense cover. We just stood motionless, watching. They seemed to drift through the forest like apparitions, nibbling on leaves with fluid, silent movements. This was the quietest encounter of my trip, but in many ways, the most profound. It was a lesson in looking closer and appreciating the subtle artistry of the wild. The Nyala isn't a big five animal, but its beauty is deep and complex. It's an animal that rewards patience and represents the hidden gems you find when you venture off the beaten path. In a world of loud safari encounters, the Nyala was a whisper. And in the quiet forests of Malawi, that whisper was more captivating than any roar. The regal spearman, sable antelope. If the Nyala was about subtlety, our next animal was pure, unfiltered majesty. It looks like it walked straight out of a myth. So elegant, it barely seems real. This was the sable antelope. While you can find sable elsewhere in Africa, they're facing major threats. But here in Malawi, they are making a huge comeback. They're a flagship species for the country's conservation success, and seeing one felt like winning the lottery. We were driving through Mayambo woodland when we rounded a bend, and there they were. A herd of about 15 grazing in a sun-drenched clearing. I literally gasped. The females were a beautiful, rich brown, but the bull stole the show. He was magnificent. His coat was a glossy, jet black that seemed to drink the light, with a brilliant white underbelly and facial markings. He looked like he was carved from obsidian and snow. And the horns, sweeping back from his head in a perfect arc, they were like a pair of giant scimitars, over 4 feet long. These aren't just for looks. They're deadly weapons used to fight off lions. A cornered sable is one of the most dangerous animals in the bush. He stood with his head held high, radiating an air of defiant pride. He wasn't just an antelope. He was a warrior king. The surprise here was the sheer, heart-stopping visual impact. No picture can prepare you for seeing a prime sable bull in person. The richness of his black coat, the stark white markings, the impossible curve of his horns. He just radiated noble power. We watched the herd for a long time. It felt less like we were observing animals and more like we'd been granted an audience with a royal court. The sable represents the soul of the African woodland, both powerful and graceful. Seeing them thriving here, in a country that fought so hard to bring its parks back, was incredibly moving. The image of that black bull against the setting sun, his scimitar horns cutting the sky, is burned into my brain forever. We're about to find an animal whose return to Malawi marks one of the greatest conservation triumphs in recent memory. If you're finding this story as incredible as I did, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It helps support these stories and you won't miss what's coming next. All right, let's go find a painted wolf. The painted wolf, African wild dog. There's rare, and then there are African wild dogs. With only about 6,600 left on the entire continent, seeing a pack is a true wildlife lottery win. For decades, they were gone from Malawi. But in July 2021, in a massive international effort, 14 wild dogs were reintroduced to Liwonde and majestic. This was the return of a vital piece of the ecosystem. Finding them became our obsession. Painted wolves, as they're often called, are constantly on the move, covering huge distances. For days, we searched, following fresh tracks and listening for the alarm calls of prey. The anticipation was killing us. Then, late one afternoon, a crackle on the radio. A collared dog signal was strong and stationary. They could be resting, or they could be on a kill. We raced against the fading light. We got to the spot and saw nothing, just dense scrub. Our guide cut the engine and we sat listening. Then we heard it, a soft, high-pitched chittering, almost like birds. It was the sound of a wild dog pack. There, Patrick pointed. My eyes adjusted and I saw them. Lying in the shade, perfectly camouflaged, was the whole pack. More than a dozen of them, a beautiful, chaotic jumble of black, yellow, and white coats, huge satellite dish ears, and white-tipped tails. Each pattern is as unique as a fingerprint. They were socializing after a hunt. Pups from a recent litter, a huge win for the project, were tumbling over each other. The vibe wasn't ferocious, it was incredibly affectionate. The surprise was the sheer intimacy of their social world. We saw an injured dog limp forward, and immediately, 2 packmates started cleaning its wounds and regurgitated meat for it. This incredible altruism, caring for their weak and injured, flies in the face of the whole survival of the fittest narrative. This was a family. We were the only vehicle there. For over an hour, we watched, spellbound, as the pups played and the adults reaffirmed their bonds. To see them here, thriving and raising a new generation in a park that was once empty, was more than a surprise. It was a profound honor and a moment of pure, unfiltered hope. The resurrected king, Lion the lion, the icon, the animal everyone wants to see. So how could a lion be a surprise? In Malawi, the answer is in its story. Like the elephants and wild dogs, lions were poached to local extinction here. For years, the king's roar was silent. Bringing them back was a monumental feat. In 2012, African parks flew the first lions back into Mahede. We weren't just looking for a big cat. We were looking for a resurrected bloodline. The search was tough. Mahede's thick woodlands are a perfect hiding spot for a stealth predator. After a full day of tracking a male whose roars we'd heard at dawn, we finally got lucky the next afternoon. We found a pride, 2 females and a young male, snoozing under a sausage tree. The surprise? The profound sense of peace. In other, busier parks, a lion sighting can be a chaotic scrum of vehicles. Here, it was just us. We cut the engine and just existed with them. They were so unbothered that one of the females got up, stretched like a giant house cat, and then plopped down in the shade of our truck, 10 feet from my open window. My heart was pounding. I could hear her breathe. I could see the old scars on her face. This wasn't a sighting through a long lens. This was an intimate audience. This is the magic of a Malawian safari. The lack of crowds creates a totally different kind of encounter. It's about quiet observation and real connection. The lions of Mayete aren't just surviving. They're calm and secure in a kingdom that was rebuilt for them. The surprise wasn't seeing a lion. The surprise was seeing a lion at peace, a king secure on his reclaimed throne. The river ghost, Pell's fishing owl. For our final surprise, we go from the biggest and most famous predator to one of the most elusive and sought-after creatures in the entire birding world. An animal so mysterious, it's achieved mythical status. The Pell's fishing owl. This giant, ginger-colored owl is one of the largest in the world and hunts for fish by snatching them from the river. We were back on the Shire River in Liwonde, one of the best places on the continent to see one. But best is a relative term. Many people try for weeks and fail. This was a mission. We set out on a boat after sunset. The river at night is a totally different world. Our guide swept a spotlight along the tangled branches of the massive trees lining the bank. For hours, we saw nothing but the glowing eyes of crocs. The search felt hopeless. You're looking for one motionless bird in a million branches, in the dark. Then he stopped the boat. The beam was fixed on a colossal fig tree. "There," he whispered, with reverence in his voice. I looked and saw a branch. "Where?" "Look again." And then I saw it. A huge, ginger-colored owl, perched motionless, staring down at the black water. It was enormous, bigger than I imagined, with huge, dark eyes that didn't reflect the light. The surprise was its absolute statuesque stillness. It was the most patient hunter I have ever seen, a living gargoyle guarding the river's secrets. The world shrank to just our boat, the beam of light, and this silent predator. Then, in a flash, it dropped, hit the water with a quiet splash, and was airborne again, a wriggling silver fish in its talons. It flew back to its perch and began to eat with that same unnerving stillness. We had found the ghost of the river. This sighting was the ultimate proof of the richness of Malawi's hidden corners. A safari here isn't just about the big, loud animals. It's about the deep cuts, the secrets revealed only to the patient. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Conclusion: I came to Malawi with a checklist in my head. I left with a gallery of feelings. The intimidating power of a hippo kingdom. The silent appearance of an elephant that embodies rebirth. The ethereal grace of the nyala. The breathtaking perfection of a sable bull. The profound hope of a wild dog pack. The quiet intimacy of sharing a moment with a lion. And the mythical stillness of a fishing owl in the dead of night. These weren't just 7 surprising animals. They were 7 chapters in one of the greatest conservation stories happening today. Malawi has proven that with dedication and partnership, the wild can return. Parks that were empty are now buzzing with life. The real surprise of Malawi is that it offers a glimpse into the future of safari, an experience that's more intimate, more meaningful, and leaves you with an incredible sense of hope. The warm heart of Africa isn't just welcoming. Its wilderness is roaring back to life. It's a story of resilience, of return, and of surprise. And it's a story that is far from over. What's the most surprising animal you've ever encountered on your travels? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you're inspired by Malawi's incredible comeback, make sure you're subscribed for more stories from the wild corners of our world. Thanks for watching.